UN observers suspend patrols due to concerns over safety. The chief UN observer in Syria has announced that all operations have been suspended until further notice, citing an escalation in violence over the past 10 days. This is the GAP Morning News, also on the programme. England defeats Sweden in Kiev, and stuntman conquers tightrope walk across the Niagara Falls. Good morning, I'm Gary Pendlebury. The chief UN observer in Syria has announced that all operations have been suspended until further notice, citing an escalation in violence over the past 10 days. The UN observer mission in Syria, UNSMIS, has consisted of some 300 armed forces who were overseeing the implementation of a ceasefire after months of fighting between Syrian government and opposition forces. UNSMIS was formed on April 21st by a resolution in the UN Security Council. It was tasked with observing whether both sides in the conflict adopted the six-point plan drawn up by the UN envoy to Syria, Kofi Annan. Its work has included reporting on a number of massacres of civilians, including those in Hula near Homs and Haifa in Laktaba province. Videos showed that several of the vehicles used by observers had bullet holes, broken windows and scratches. Many hundreds of people, including civilians, rebels and government forces, have been killed in the 2 months since Kofi Annan's ceasefire deal was supposed to come into effect. Last week, shots were fired at a car carrying UN observers after trying to investigate alleged massacres in the towns of Quibir and Masaraf. They were turned away from the town of Haifa by angry Assad supporters, who threw stones and metal rods at the convoy, a spokeswoman for the Monitors has said. Nick Wallander, a member of the famed Flying Wallanders family of aerialists, has completed a historic tightrope crossing through the mist over the Niagara Falls Gorge. The 33-year-old made the walk from the US side of the falls to the Canadian side, a journey of 1,800 feet, that's 550 meters, over the treacherous waters, rocks, and in little more than 25 minutes. He then stepped from a 2-inch wire, 5 centimeters, onto safe ground in Canada to wild cheers from a crowd of thousands. More than a century ago, an aerialist known as the Great Blodin walked a high wire strung farther down the gorge, but his trek over the brink of the falls had never before been attempted. Along the way, suspended over the falls, Wallander took small, steady steps on a slick cable through swirling winds. ABC, the television network that broadcast the event with a 5-second delay, occasionally interviewed him along the walk, asking him about the conditions and how he was coping. That mist was thick, and it was hard to see at times, he said later in the walk, when he was asked about the greatest challenge. Wind going one way, mist another. It was very uncomfortable for a while. The network had also insisted he wear a safety tether, a first time for the performer, that would connect him to the cable should he fall, and said it would stop broadcasting if he unhooked it. Wallander fought the condition at first, eventually agreeing, but it gave himself an out. He would unhook only if directed to do so by his father, who designed the harness and acted as his safety coordinator. As it turned out, the tether was never tested. Wallander walked the wire with what appeared to be the perfect balance and confidence. There were 4,000 tickets that sold out in less than 5 minutes when they went on sale in recent weeks, and crowds began gathering early on Friday. Hopefully it will be very peaceful and relaxing, Wallander said beforehand. I'm often very relaxed when I'm on the wire, he added. There may be some tears because this is a dream of mine. Since the great Blodin took his high-wire walk on a band that had been in place on similar studs over the famed falls, Wallander waged a 2-year crusade to convince the US and Canadian officials to let him try the fate. A private helicopter rescue team was part of the $1.3 million that Wallander spent on the walk. Kathy Swaffer of Port Huron, Michigan, who had set up a lawn chair hours before the event, said that she had seen the Wallanders perform years earlier in Detroit. "I think it's a person wanting to do what they do for a living and fulfilling a lifelong dream," she added. Wallander's great-grandfather, Carl Wallander, died in 1978 during a walk between two buildings in Puerto Rico at the age of 73. Wallander repeated that walk last year with his mother. Wallander said he had obtained permits for a future walk over the Grand Canyon in Arizona, which would be the first ever attempted and roughly 3 times longer than the walk over the Niagara Falls. Sport, and the Three Lions roared in Kiev last night as England defeated Sweden 3-2. Andy Carroll scored England's first goal after 23 minutes as he headed in a pass from captain Steven Gerrard. Sweden equalised shortly after half-time when former Aston Villa defender Olav Mellberg found the back of the net. It was the first of the 2 goals on the night for the Swede, as unmarked he had headed past Joe Hart again 10 minutes later to give him the lead. England manager Roy Hodgson brought on Theo Walcott for James Milner 2 minutes later, and within 3 minutes of arriving on the pitch, he scored an equaliser for England. Then, 78 minutes into what was an emotional game, Danny Welbeck headed England to victory. The Manchester United striker told ITV Sport he was delighted to score the winning goal. Arsenal's Theo Walcott added that finally getting a chance for England in his second major tournament has felt like a long time coming. He reveals that England manager Roy Hodgson didn't feel a need to issue any instructions on the touchline. The manager didn't say much. "They know what I can do." He said that during the week, these next 2 games will be very important for you. You need to come on and make a difference. That's all I need to know, that he had so much trust in me. England manager Roy Hodgson said he was delighted by England's 3-2 win over Sweden in Kiev and hailed the influence of substitute Theo Walcott as his match winner. Theo showed his qualities and played a major part in this result, Hodgson told ITV's Gabriel Clark. And Hodgson indicated his mind was already on the quarter-final place, admitting it's a cliché, but there were no easy games in these groups, but we've given ourselves a chance of qualification. England fans could not contain their excitement as they streamed out of the stadium and onto the streets of Kiev after the match. England now only need a draw in the final Group D match against co-host Ukraine in Donetsk on Tuesday evening to qualify for the quarter-finals. In Group D's other match, France defeated Ukraine by 2-0. A lightning storm in Donetsk had meant the match was temporarily suspended after just 5 minutes, but the weather cleared for the fixture to be completed. For full analysis and reaction from the England's second Euro 2012 match, visit ITV Sport website. And finally, the papers this morning. The Sun says to Hell and Beck this morning. That is showing a picture there of England winning at the game at Kiev last night. The Times also pictures England's victory last night too, but its main headline says Gay Tory challenges intolerant church. That is the story there of The continued row and disputes over gay marriage is in churches. The Independent says, draconian judge says riot sentences were fair. The Guardian also images England's victory, but that main headline says, Murdoch asked Blair to speed up Iraq war. Campbell Diaries. The Daily Mirror says, Swede revenge. England finally beat the team. That is also England's victory imaged again. The Daily Mail says that 1 million patients to suffer next week during the strike of doctors. Daily Express says hay fever hell for millions. Apparently the weather is causing hay fever to be more potent this year. And finally, a good look now at the iNewspaper, which says, the girl who beat the bureaucrats. Council forced to back down over ban on 9-year-old's lunch blog. Decision follows storm of protest led by celebrity chef Jamie Oliver. This is the girl who blogged on her school dinners without people knowing, and that's now come to light. Other headlines on this paper include draconian judge riot sentences were fair, similar to the Independent, which is about those people who have been sentenced what's quoted silly imprisonment for so many years. Also pictures the OBE for Gary Barlow in honours, and finally UK faces more weather misery. That is because of more flooding and thunderstorms prone after recent flooding in Wales and Bognor Regis. And that's the way your news is looking this morning. For now though, it's time to say goodbye and do have a very good weekend.